300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a jam-packed Monday morning. This was one of the wackiest and bizarre and unpredictable NFL seasons that I've ever seen. We had high-scoring teams unable to put up points. We had defenses that have been sluggish the entire year all of a sudden put the clamps down. Teams that were favored by double digits ended up losing. We saw the Rams lose to the Titans without Derrick Henry. We saw the 49ers lose to the Cardinals without DeAndre Hopkins and Kyler Murray. We saw the Cowboys lose to the Broncos with Dak coming back. We saw the Bills lose to the Jaguars 9-6 on the road. Just kind of mind-boggling and perplexing types of results from the NFL weekend. But that's why we love the NFL, is because of the unpredictability nature of the sport. Every single week, any given Sunday, any team can win. And we have to start with one of the most highly anticipated games from the weekend, the Chiefs and the Packers. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs, they edged out the Green Bay Packers yesterday, 13-7 at home inside Arrowhead or outside Arrowhead Stadium. Now, let me first say that this game was much more about the Packers to me and the manner in which they lost and the future of the organization, as opposed to the Chiefs collecting a win and looking a little bit sluggish offensively. Because the majority of the game was just really wacky and out of sorts for the Packers. They had so many special team gaffes. They had a missed field goal, a blocked field goal, a punt that ended up touching off one of their own players' feet to set up the Chiefs in great position. When the Chiefs actually punted, it touched one of the Packers' feet, and it was recovered by the Chiefs. Just a lot of special team gaffes that put them constantly behind, constantly trailing, constantly fighting in an uphill battle. A lot of self-induced errors and mistakes on special teams, which is a bit rare. And obviously, Aaron Rodgers was absent from the team because of this. Kind of inexcusably was away from the team because of his COVID-19 ruse. He claimed to be immunized and he wasn't. And you combine that with the fact that here you have a kid in Jordan Love who's a young quarterback in the NFL. And I'm going to reserve some of my judgment. I want to be fair. I want to be patient with him. This was, after all, his first career NFL start. It was a huge nationally televised game, and he's making his first career start. So I don't want to crush the guy for how he performed yesterday. I want to kind of reserve my assessment for him, though this might be the only. But to me, this was the ultimate vindication and the ultimate validation for Aaron Rodgers and the position that he's held with the Green Bay Packers organization throughout this offseason. Because, again, Jordan Love, while I don't at all think he's going to be a bust, there are some things that I'll touch on that I really liked from him. But the reality is, this was his first career start, and it looked like it. It looked like it was his first career NFL start. It looked like a guy who was nervous, who was frazzled out there, who wasn't patient, didn't want to sit in the pocket, was constantly fleeing to try and scramble and get away. He never looked comfortable. Now, you can give a lot of credit to Steve Spagnuolo for blitzing him practically every single time. The Chiefs were dialing up pressure every single time that they could on him. And for the majority of the game, he didn't really handle it particularly well. He was missing throws. And that's with an offense that features Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones, and they go 2 for 12 on third downs. The offense looked anemic for the majority of the game. And so the reality is, Jordan Love didn't really look ready. He didn't really look the most prepared. And so the reason why this is vindication for Aaron Rodgers is because if you're the Green Bay Packers, your Super Bowl window is now. The type of production that you got from your defense, who I thought played perhaps their best defensive game of the year, and perhaps one of their best defensive games over the last couple of years, they looked incredible, but their offense couldn't put together and string together consecutive drives. Now, to Jordan Love's credit, the one drive that he led the team to a touchdown on their last drive, he looked a lot more poised. He looked a lot more in control. And I think that that's a great positive sign for the Packers moving forward. But the reality is, if you need to part ways with Jordan Love to preserve and retain Aaron Rodgers for another 3 to 4 years at the bare minimum, you do it. That's the reality is the championship window for the Green Bay Packers is right now. And what Jordan Love's debut showed you is he's not ready to take over the reins and at least play at the high level that Aaron Rodgers has been playing at. And if you really want to be vying for a Super Bowl, Aaron Rodgers has to be the priority. He has to be the priority. And I think, again, obviously the Green Bay Packers have kind of taken multiple ones for Aaron Rodgers, has kind of taken one for the team, as it were, aiding and abetting this COVID-19 gambit of his. So I'm sure there's some appreciation there. But the reality is, if the Green Bay Packers are thinking, hey, we want to move off of Aaron Rodgers because he's a little, petulant at times and can be a little bit of a diva at times, so that we can insert Jordan Love, then I think they're making a big mistake. Because right now, again, even though Jordan Love is young, he's going to continue to get better. I just don't think he's there right now. And that's why when I look at the Chiefs, obviously something's going on with them. They haven't looked the same. Again, they just seem to be out of sorts a little bit, out of whack, little disjointed for whatever reason. There isn't as much harmony between Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. They haven't been on the same wavelength the entire season, really, since I would say that Bills loss. So I guess over the last 4 or 5 games, they just haven't been as connected. And it's kind of boggling to me how all of a sudden they've kind of crumbled a little bit. But the reality is they're 5-4. They're 5-4. And so when I think about the Chiefs, a couple things come to mind. First of all, I think that they're really starting to miss, and I'm surprised that I'm saying this, but I think they're really starting to miss the reliability of Sammy Watkins, especially at that number 2, number 3 wide receiver spot, because right now they're relying on a carousel of guys in McCole Hardman and Byron Pringle and DeMarcus Robinson to try and fill the void of Sammy Watkins. And right now they haven't been as reliable. They're dropping passes, and they're just not quite as sharp. And I think that we're starting to miss, and I think the Chiefs are starting to see the absence of Sammy Watkins really start to rear its ugly head right now. But the one thing that I will say, and again, because this is the first time in 3 years that we're seeing the Chiefs kind of quote unquote struggle and not be quite as harmonious and not have the same chemistry and continuity between Mahomes and his receivers. But the one time in the game that Mahomes had to be Mahomes-esque and make those types of magical plays and extemporize with his legs was on the one play where he needed it the most. You're up by 6, 3rd and 10, first down ices the game. And Mahomes did Mahomes-like stuff, was magical on that one play. Just extemporized with his legs, improvised, ran out, scrambled, bought himself time, threw on the run, found Tyreek Hill for the first down, and that was the game. And those are the types of plays that we had been missing from Mahomes, but it was finally an encouraging sign to see that come back and be featured once again in this offense. But the interesting thing about the Chiefs, and this will be my final point on them, is, again, as much as we've ridiculed and scrutinized them for their record and maligned kind of how they've played on both sides of the football, the reality is they're 5-4. And when you look at all 4 of their losses, they're all against good teams. The Chiefs are not a bad team. This is not an awful team. This is not a team that's incapable of reaching the playoffs. 4 of their losses came to teams that we've dubbed Super Bowl contenders and some of the best teams in the AFC. They lost to the Ravens. They lost to the Chargers. They lost to the Bills. And they lost to the Titans. Well, the Titans have the best record in the AFC. And the Bills are still 5-3, one of the best teams in the AFC. The Ravens and the Chargers are 2 games that arguably the Chiefs should have won, if not for a fumble by Clyde Edwards-Helaire against the Ravens and a late pick by Mahomes against the Chargers. Otherwise, those are games that they win. And we're having an entirely different discussion. So as shocked as I am by the mediocrity in their record, just as much as many of you are, I also think it's important to take a step back and be a little bit fair, be a little bit objective about this team and recognize that, hey, you know what? They're actually just 5-4. The losses that they've had have come to good teams. I know we've come to expect, based on their consistency over the last 3 years and consistent greatness over the last 3 years, that they should just be steamrolling over all these teams like they had done. And we haven't seen that this year. But the reality is they're not losing to bad teams. They're beating the teams that they're supposed to beat. It's not the prettiest fashion, but they're beating the teams they're supposed to beat. And at the end of the day, you look up at the standings and they're 5-4. And right now they're just half a game back of the second best record in the conference, or a full game back of the second best record, half a game back of the third best record in the conference. Still an opportunity to win their own division, which we didn't think was possible midway through the year. And this is why I want to transition now to the San Francisco 49ers. And especially in particular, Kyle Shanahan. So the San Francisco 49ers lost to the Arizona Cardinals yesterday, 31-17. Now, mind you, this was a game that was played without Kyler Murray, without DeAndre Hopkins, without A.J. Green, and Chase Edmonds had to exit the game early in the first quarter due to an injury. So the 49ers right now are 3-5. 3-5 on the year. In fact, they're winless in 4 games at home this year. 4 games at Levi Stadium this year, they haven't won. And they really haven't played particularly well in 3 of the 4. The game against the Packers, they played pretty well. Aaron Rodgers just led the Packers on an heroic comeback. But the thing that's interesting is people have been characterizing this team as broken. That they're kind of broken under Kyle Shanahan. And the one thing that we know is there are a lot of coaches in the NFL, and I'm sure that you can think of other sports where this applies, but I want to stick with the NFL. There are a lot of coaches in the NFL who we think are good coaches. They possess the persona, the presence on the mic in the pregame and the postgame conferences. They've showed signs of brilliance, and we deem them to be good head coaches in the NFL. Yet when they have had some successful seasons, yet there isn't enough substantial empirical evidence to support that. There are a lot of coaches that we think are good head coaches, but you look at their records overall, and it doesn't scream winning coach or doesn't scream Hall of Fame coach. Perfect example, Ron Rivera. Everyone loves Ron Rivera. I like Ron Rivera. This is a guy who was an All-American as a linebacker at Cal. He was drafted by the Chicago Bears, was part of their 1985 Super Bowl winning team on the defensive side, one of the best defenses ever in the NFL. And he ended up becoming a defensive coordinator for the San Diego Chargers at the time between 2008 and 2010. One of those seasons, the Chargers ultimately went to the AFC Championship game. Then that is what kind of propelled him to becoming a head football coach in the NFL. And now he's in the midst of his 11th NFL season as a head coach. And this is a guy who is stoic, who's a no-nonsense type of guy. He preaches accountability. He's tough. He's tough-nosed, this guy in Ron Rivera. A lot of respect. But you look at his head coaching record, and people want to say that he's a really good coach, and I want to as well. But the reality is, if you were to omit that 1-15-1 season with the Carolina Panthers, in which Cam Newton won the MVP, the Panthers reached the Super Bowl, he's a sub 500 coach. In 8 of his 11 seasons as a head coach, he's had losing records. I bring that up because clearly it's not that we've misjudged or mischaracterized Ron Rivera as a good coach, but the empirical evidence doesn't support that. We just believe that he's a good coach. And I think that's the issue at play here with Kyle Shanahan. And this is where it relates to Kyle Shanahan, because he's in a very similar position to me than where Ron Rivera was. If we're to be truly fair in evaluating Kyle Shanahan, because this game yesterday was a real head turner. This was one of those games where you look directly at the coaching staff and you say, how do you let this happen when the two best players of the opponents aren't playing and another couple of top offensive weapons aren't a part of the game, and you still lose at home? Kyle Shanahan right now, he had a very similar trajectory. Started as an offensive coordinator with the Washington football team. At the time, they were the Washington Redskins. Helped Robert Griffin III become the Offensive Rookie of the Year. We know what he did with the Atlanta Falcons, helping lead their offense to reach the Super Bowl. Matty Ice, the nickname, but Matt Ryan ended up winning league MVP in the NFL that season. And now with the 49ers, he got the head coaching job in 2017, which, mind you, the exact same time that Sean McVay got his job with the LA Rams. In that time, Kyle Shanahan is 32-40 as a head coach. We were just talking about how Ed Orgeron from LSU, if you were to omit that one season in which Joe Burrow led him on this incredible magical ride, is a sub 500 coach in college, and he was just released by LSU. Now, I'm not claiming that he and Kyle Shanahan are the same, but it's just another example. And the reality is, for Kyle Shanahan, he took over in 2017. They go 6-10. 2018, they make the trade for Jimmy G. Really, they made the trade for Jimmy G at the very end of 2017, but 2018, Jimmy G tears his ACL. So we kind of give Shanahan a pass. 49ers go 4-12. 2019, of course, they go 13-3, have that magical run to the Super Bowl. And people are dubbing him the next wonderkind. And then last year happens, and Jimmy G suffers a high ankle sprain, and they're 6-10 again. And we actually commended Kyle Shanahan and applauded his efforts because apparently, according to Pro Football Outsiders, they were the team most ravaged by injuries last year. They were the most depleted roster in the NFL last year, and they still managed to go 6-10. And now this year they're 3-5. And what makes matters worse is you lost to Colt McCoy at home. Colt McCoy went 22 of 26 for nearly 250 yards. This is a guy who has only started 2 games in the past 10 seasons as a career backup. Colt McCoy. So this was an atrocious loss to suffer to the Arizona Cardinals at home. Now, I know a lot of people can give credit to the Cardinals, and perhaps that's more of a reflection of their depth. James Conner had a tremendous day, but to me, I'm looking at the 49ers coaching staff, and I'm saying that's not something that should happen. That seriously is not something that should happen. And Sean McVay in the same time frame is 50-23 as a head coach of the Rams, and he's also reached the Super Bowl, and he's never had a losing record in LA in the same 5-year span as Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers. 4 out of 5 losing seasons so far, as opposed to 5-0 when it comes to winning seasons with the Rams. And the amount of money, and this is why even John Lynch, I think, is on the hot seat. The amount that the 49ers invested in drafting, in moving up to draft Trey Lance at number 3, they're all in right now. The amount that they've invested in the present of the 49ers, there's too much money at stake to just let these seasons kind of riddle themselves out. And I think that if the 49ers, again, kind of suffer a washed season and this spirals downward, I'm afraid that Kyle Shanahan could be in trouble. And I think that it would behoove the 49ers to move off him. I think they strongly need to consider it. Now, again, I think that Kyle Shanahan is a good coach. I think that he has showed a lot of brilliance. I thought that he was kind of one of these nascent coaches that was starting to burgeon in the NFL, but I'm not certain of that as much anymore. Because every team has to deal with injuries. Every team has to deal with adversity and not the perfect situations. And when we look at that 49ers team that did reach the Super Bowl in 2019, it was predominantly due to their defense. They had a top 2 defense in the NFL. Now they also had a top 5 offense that season, but most people kind of were petrified of the 49ers because of that defense. And right now, there aren't many excuses. They're fully healthy. Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, Jason Verrett, Emmanuel Mosley, Fred Warner, they're all back. Quan Williams, these guys are all back for the 49ers. George Kittle is back. I know that Raheem Mostert isn't playing right now, but Rams lost Cam Akers to the start of the year. That hasn't slowed them down. So I just don't really understand what's been going on. And I think that it might behoove the 49ers again to try and maybe usher in a new regime for Trey Lance in this new Trey Lance era, because obviously we know Jimmy G is not the future with the 49ers. Not that he's having a bad season or anything. He played well yesterday, but Trey Lance is going to be the future, and perhaps the team may have to consider ushering in some type of new regime, because after a loss like that, that was a bad loss for the 49ers to suffer yesterday. That's what I think. I just don't know how much leeway they're going to continue to give Kyle Shanahan again if this becomes another lost season. That's what I'm thinking. So, want to transition to Oto Beckham Jr. and the kind of ongoing saga that I guess it isn't ongoing anymore. It concluded, and so Oto Beckham Jr. was officially released by the Cleveland Browns last week. And currently, actually just this morning, he's officially been placed on waivers for a potential team. Now, apparently he's interested in joining a contender. He would prefer free agency, although right now he's placed on waivers. He's been eyeing the Seattle Seahawks, is what he says, but the San Francisco 49ers and the New Orleans Saints are also teams to keep an eye on. Now, mind you, this was a guy who had kind of one really productive year with the Browns, had over 1,000 receiving yards. And then the last 2 seasons, the relationship between Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. on the field just regressed and really just almost had a deleterious effect on the team, so much so that Oto Beckham Jr. barely saw any targets the last 2 seasons. They kind of just had a lack of harmony. They were disjointed, disconnected, just never seemed, everything felt so forced. And that was the big problem. It wasn't like this seamless fit like perhaps we had all hoped. And obviously, they got exacerbated by the social media posts by Oto Beckham Jr.'s father. And even the Browns actually just came out this morning, and they said that they were surprised by those kind of antics and those kind of demonstrations by the father posting videos on social media, and even LeBron kind of aiming to encourage the Browns to cut bait with Oto Beckham Jr. All of that kind of surprised him. Bottom line is now he's on waivers. Those are the teams that he's eyeing. So I want to first address the teams that he's laid out and then share the team that I believe would be the perfect fit. So first, when it comes to the Seattle Seahawks, the expectation is that potentially Russell Wilson could be coming back this week as soon as week 10, which, or I guess would be next week. So there's some high hopes that, hey, with the return of Russell Wilson, perhaps an arrival of Odell Beckham Jr., that can catapult them and kind of vault them into the postseason. The Seahawks right now are 3-5, tied for the worst record in the NFC West. So that's the one hurdle that I'm a little bit skeptical of when it comes to the Seahawks is you're behind the Arizona Cardinals and the Rams, which means you have to be one of the 2 other wild card teams. Because the Rams are going to collect 1, and now you're battling with the Saints, maybe the 49ers, maybe the Falcons, maybe the Vikings for one of those last 2 playoff spots, which is possible. But the problem is they've got a formidable duo at wide receiver with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And I think if you're a guy in Oto Beckham Jr., I know he says he wants to be a part of a contender, and I believe him. But at the same time, I think that you can want to be a part of a contending team, but also be a valuable and significant contributor to that cause. And I think that at the end of the day, Oto Beckham Jr., he's an athlete. He's a competitive guy at heart. And I think that he wants to be a big contributor. And I don't know if his role is going to increase significantly more with a team like Seattle than, let's say, Cleveland, who he was just on. So it's not that I wouldn't recommend Oto Beckham Jr. play alongside Russell Wilson. I don't know if the Seahawks are truly in contention right now. And to be honest, I just don't know how big of a role he's going to have with that team. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily recommend the Seahawks be the first team. And that's why I kind of take issue with the second team he laid out potentially to keep your eye on, which is the San Francisco 49ers. Because the 49ers are kind of in the midst of this disarray right now. They kind of haven't seemed to figure their life out yet. They're in the same boat. They're at the bottom of the NFC West with 3-5 overall record. And they also have a pretty deep wide receiving core with George Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and Mohamed Sanu. Now, I think Oto Beckham Jr. could crack that rotation, but you're also joining an offense in Kyle Shanahan who utilizes the run game a lot, sometimes more than the throw game, than the pass game. Jimmy G is your quarterback. Again, I don't think that Jimmy G is that bad. Is Oto Beckham Jr. going to be frustrated if Jimmy G isn't going to hit him on some deep balls? That's the problem. That's kind of the problem. So I don't think he's necessarily the best fit in San Francisco personally. And again, with the playoff format, 4 automatic bids if you win the division, then there's only 3 wildcard games. So now you throw the 49ers in with the Seahawks. with the Rams, with the Saints, with the Falcons, with the Vikings. Even the Bears and the Eagles are 3-6. They've got a shot. There are a lot of teams that are kind of in the mix. And I just, even if the 49ers can squeak into the playoffs, is anyone really viewing them as a Super Bowl contender? Not really. And then finally, the New Orleans Saints, I actually think from a fit perspective, it's great. I actually really like the New Orleans Saints. They're 5-3. They're in a great position right now, just trailing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by a game in their own division. I like Sean Payton. I like the offensive scheme that he brings. The personnel is great in New Orleans. And Oto Beckham Jr. would fit perfectly given the fact Michael Thomas unfortunately experienced the setback, which is forcing him to miss the remainder of the year. So he would certainly receive a lot of targets. The only problem with the Saints is who's going to be throwing him the ball. Is it going to be Taysom Hill? Is it going to be Trevor Siemian? Does he want either one of those two guys throwing him the ball? Personally, I don't think that's the best option out there. I really don't, and I think it's as simple as that. He wants someone who is a highly touted quarterback to be able to hit him on his runs. That's what I think. That's what I think. So I don't necessarily, again, I like that it's certainly a good fit, but is he going to be thrilled with the play at the quarterback position? Which is why, for me, the one team that I think would benefit greatly from Oto Beckham Jr., and I think that Oto Beckham Jr. should want to go play for, is the Las Vegas Raiders. I think it's a match made in heaven. The Raiders with Rich Bisaccia right now, I understand that they've been on this turbulent ride and they've had to kind of deal with a bunch of off-the-field distractions. But the reality is, unfortunately, they're 5-3 despite all of that chaos. So they're firmly in the playoff hunt, and they're only about 2 games back of the best overall record in the AFC. They're only a game back of the second best record in the conference. They're tied for the third best record in the conference right now. They're tied for the best record in their own division in the AFC West. So I really like the Las Vegas Raiders. I think Derek Carr is showing once again why he's a really good quarterback in the NFL. And unfortunately, due to the tragic and unfortunate events regarding Henry Ruggs, there's a void that they need to fill. The Las Vegas Raiders need a vertical threat. They need another playmaker on the outside, and that's something that Oto Beckham Jr. can fit in and provide. And I think that he would see a lot of targets because outside of Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller, Oto Beckham Jr. is the next guy. It was Henry Ruggs, obviously not anymore. So Oto Beckham Jr., I think, could fit beautifully with the Las Vegas Raiders. Again, he'd be joining a winning team, a team that has legitimate aspirations for a run at the Super Bowl. And though as a conference, there are more better teams in the AFC, I think the only legitimate Super Bowl contenders right now are all in the NFC. So I think that this would be a way to stay away from the NFC, from Tom Brady and the Bucs, from the Packers, from the Cardinals, from the Rams. You stay away from that and you play in kind of like a wild, wild west AFC style conference. And on top of that, you're living in Las Vegas. So personality-wise, it fits perfectly. You're living in a vibrant city, a buzzing city, passionate fan base. There's entertainment around you. That's the kind of lifestyle that Odell Beckham Jr. wants to be a part of. I think the Las Vegas Raiders would be a perfect fit, especially given the circumstances right now at their skilled positions. That's where I'd recommend he'd go, and that's the team that I think should seriously consider trying to pick him up off the waiver, is the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, final topic of the day before my Malkins moments. So I want to talk about the boxing match that took place on Saturday night, Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant. Alvarez knocked him out via technical knockout in the 11th round. And listen, I'll touch on Caleb Plant in a moment. The fact that it even lasted that long speaks to the defensive prowess of Plant in this instance. But Canelo Alvarez became, first of all, the first undisputed super middleweight champion, unified all 4 major super middleweight titles, all four divisions at the superweight the super middleweight level. He conquered all of that, became Mexico's first undisputed champion. So this is a guy who retained his WBA super middleweight title, his WBC, WBO, and the Ring super middleweight titles. He also won the IBF super middleweight title. And again, collected all 4 belts in one weight class to become the undisputed champion. And right now, this is a guy who's 57-1-2, 57 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws in his career with 39 knockouts. And the only loss that he suffered was to arguably the greatest boxer of all time in Floyd Mayweather. And he wasn't even knocked out. He lost via majority decision. So, and that was in 2013. When I watch Canelo Alvarez, the thing that stands out to me, and this is something that I've talked about with him before, is a quality that Manny Pacquiao, I think, possesses as well, is the ultimate fearlessness. This is a guy that's not running or scared when he's in the ring. He was dominating the center of the ring throughout the entire night, constantly had Caleb Plant not on the ropes, but just backed up into a corner, constantly feeling this pressure that Canelo Alvarez was applying the entire night, round after round after round, just relentlessly pursuing body shots. He relied on the body attack, which is a tactic that he frequently employs. He was landing vicious uppercuts, hooks, jabs. That left hand, if you're not careful, that left hand can knock you out. And the power that he was generating on those strikes, that was the biggest difference in the bout, in the fight, because the efficiency and the effectiveness of those blows did a number on Caleb Plant that couldn't be matched. Caleb Plant threw 80 more punches at Canelo Alvarez on Saturday. And yet, Alvarez landed and connected on 10% more of the punches that he threw. Caleb Plant threw 80 more punches and connected on 10% fewer of them than Canelo Alvarez. And that's your fight right there. That's your fight right there. And Canelo Alvarez is one of these kind of predator animals and predatory animals where they sense weakness, they seek out weakness, then they expose the weakness and they exploit it. And when they see a wounded animal, they come in for the kill. And that was Caleb Plant in the 11th round. Alvarez landed a vicious uppercut, just some ferocious body shots, knocked Plant down to the ground for a second, and he knew even when Plant tried to bounce back up, he was standing on unsteady legs, on wobbly legs, and he knew he had him. And then he came in and just unloaded a barrage of shots that finally knocked him out. And it's just impressive. I always am amazed when I watch Canelo Alvarez, because this is a guy who is so businesslike. He's not about mind games. He's not about trash talking. He's about just showing you that he's better. He just acts so professionally, takes care of business. He shows respect in post-game interviews. Everything about him is someone that you would want to root for. And I think that right now, he is arguably the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. He's one of the greatest boxers ever. He's the biggest sport. He's the biggest attraction in the sport right now. And I just think, again, for someone who's known as a counter puncher, he was initiating all the action on Saturday night. He wasn't waiting around. And Plant, again, to his credit, this is a guy in Caleb Plant who entered the fight 21-0. He was undefeated. Known for his defensive prowess. And Alvarez was able to puncture that exterior and eventually break through. Kind of was able to find the metaphorical bridge to climb over the moat to land at the castle doorsteps. And he was able to knock down the door. So I was really impressed with Alvarez. And again, this is someone who kind of had to prove that he was the undisputed champion, knocked out Caleb Smith, knocked out Billy Joe Saunders in like May last year to set up this fight. He told Caleb Plant, I'm coming after you. And it's just impressive, again, that the fact that Plant even hung in there for 11 rounds is a sign of great respect to him. Even Alvarez said to him, there's no shame in losing. That was a great match. That was a great fight, a great bout. And now maybe it sets up the potential trilogy fight with Triple G. Obviously, the first two were for the middleweight championship. The first fight ended in a draw. Second fight, Alvarez won by majority decision, so it could set up an interesting trilogy fight. Kamaru Usman, who just won the UFC 268 title, welterweight title, apparently is eyeing a boxing match with Alvarez. He defeated Colby Covington by unanimous decision, UFC 268 rather, to retain the welterweight title as his 15th straight win. Obviously, that would be fascinating. That'd be a ginormous match to showcase the greatest, well, the current number one UFC fighter in Usman, who's a trained boxer. He's tactical. He's has that background. Now, whether or not he's to the level of Canelo Alvarez, I'm not sure if he is, though he's a good boxer. But obviously, it would set up a huge payday for both of these guys. But again, I just want to praise Canelo Alvarez because it's so much fun watching him fight. The guy just, there aren't any gimmicks with him. What you see is what you get, and what you get is greatness. And again, the best boxer right now, his only loss is to Floyd Mayweather. There is a credible argument to be made that when it comes to his weight class, and mind you, this is a guy who started off becoming the undisputed champion in the 154 weight range. Then he moved up, and now he's 168. Like, he's doing this at multiple weight classes, and it's extremely, extremely impressive what he's doing. Another dominant performance. Can't wait to see whomever he fights next. So, final topic of the day, my Malkins moments. I have a number of great Malkins moments this week. So excited to share with them. First of all, to share with you these Malkins moments. First, the Purdue quarterback, Aiden O'Connell. The quarterback out of Purdue threw for 536 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in the 40-29 upset win over number 3 Michigan State. They knocked off the Spartans, their second top 5 win of the year against the top 5 team. They beat Iowa, who was ranked number 2 earlier in the season, on the road in Iowa City. Again, 40-54 for 536 yards and 3 touchdowns. Big shout out to Aiden O'Connell. That is a huge, huge time performance for them and the Boilermakers. Another top 5 win on the year. You just can't keep counting them out. He's a big reason why. As I just talked about with Canelo Alvarez, he made history unifying 4 168-pound titles with the super middleweight knockout win over Caleb Plant. Again, becoming the undisputed champion. Big shout out to Canelo Alvarez. The Ohio State wide receiver, Jackson Smith-Njigba, had 15 receptions, 240 yards, and a touchdown in the 26-17 win over Nebraska. It was the most receptions in a game in Ohio State school history In fact, it was the second most receiving yards in school history. Terry Glenn recorded 253 receiving yards in a 54-14 win at Pittsburgh in 1995. And Smith-Njigba has just eclipsed that, not that mark, but basically just inserted himself into that echelon of Ohio State wide receiver glory. I mean, that was just a sensational individual performance. Ohio State didn't look great against Nebraska. Credit Nebraska for putting up a good fight, but his individual performance was tremendous. Speaking of individual performances, so the Jacksonville Jaguars, they beat the Buffalo Bills 9-6 yesterday. But, and mind you, it was one of the most bizarre wins of the weekend. One of the most bizarre upset wins. Shout out to Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence and that team. But the defense is the story. In particular, a guy by the name of Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, the linebacker for the Buffalo Bills, sacked the quarterback, Josh Allen. Now, mind you, this is the first time in NFL history that a player has sacked a quarterback with the same exact name. Yes, Josh Allen sacked Josh Allen. The first time it's ever happened in NFL history. It's just mind-boggling. And he led the team in tackles with 8, in total tackles with 2. He recorded an interception. He recorded a fumble recovery, the first time in his career that he's recorded one of those. And this was a guy who was the 7th overall pick in the 2019 draft class, selected by the Jaguars. He's just 24 years of age. And a stellar defensive performance individually. Obviously, the whole team did as well, but giving the shout out, just Josh Allen on Josh Allen crime. We've never seen it before in the NFL, and we may not ever see it in our lifetime. That's how much time has elapsed. So we'll see. Final 3. So Ty Chandler, the running back for North Carolina, had a sensational day. North Carolina upset number 9, Wake Forest, who was undefeated at the time, 58-54. And Ty Chandler rushed 22 times for 213 yards and 4 touchdowns. And we're starting to kind of see this pipeline of really talented North Carolina running backs, especially in recent history. We saw Michael Carter last year. He was just drafted by the Jets. Javonte Williams was drafted by the Denver Broncos. So we're starting to see some of these running backs out of Chapel Hill and Mac Brown start to really assert their dominance, and that was a big-time performance by Chandler. In baseball, there were 5 St. Louis Cardinals who received the Gold Glove Award. That was the first time ever in MLB history. Obviously, not just in the NL, in the National League was that the first time ever, but the first time ever in MLB history that 5 players from the same team, from the St. Louis Cardinals, won the award. We had Paul Goldschmidt, Tommy Edman, Nolan Arenado, Harrison Bader, and Tyler O'Neill. For Arenado, it was his 9th Gold Glove Award and his first since he was traded from the Colorado Rockies last spring. Paul Goldschmidt, it was his 4th Gold Glove Award since he was a member of the Arizona Cardinals in 2017. And for O'Neill, it was his 2nd Gold Glove Award in a row for that guy. So major shout out to that team. What a defensive performance that those guys individually had. And then finally, in the MLS, Chris Wondolowski officially announced his retirement from the MLS, leaves the sport, leaves the MLS as the MLS all-time leading scorer. A tremendous career, drafted by the San Jose Earthquakes in 2005. He's played in 417 matches, 171 goals scored, leaves as the MLS all-time leading scorer, a 17-year career. Fantastic career. That's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central. and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter at morning_Joe_ or at Jonah Malkin on Twitter, at JMalk97 on Instagram, and Jonah Malkin on Twitter. Thank you so much. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.